Hello, my name is Jared Morris, and this is Settled Christianity, coming at you with what might end up being a two-part episode, really, about a kind of interesting topic that I've been thinking about for a while. As you see from the title, we're going to be looking at the difference between biblical and systematic theology. Sorry. If you've been around for a while, especially if you've gone to a Bible college, you've heard this distinction about biblical theology and systematic theology. And for a long time, I didn't really understand the difference. And for a long time, a lot of people, not just about how it's set up. I understand that systematic is supposed to be showing the systems of it, uh, but I didn't really understand the function of it. What's the point of biblical theology over systematic theology? And I want to kind of look at this, the idea of drawing theology, drawing ideas from the Bible, and then putting them in the system, as we find in systematic theologies, and how this process can help us understand the Bible more. So, in my mind, there's a lot of definitions. The definition of biblical theology, many times, is very, very generic. It is the theology of the Bible. Thank you for your very helpful definition, dictionary. Uh, but my idea of a biblical theology is drawing straight propositions or straight statements of truth from the Bible and presenting them, or getting a grasp of what are the exact claims in the Bible. So, for example, we look in Genesis chapter 1 and we find, in the beginning, God. Okay, so God exists. That is a claim in the Bible. This is what the Bible teaches. And we go through Genesis and we find that God created the universe. Okay, that's a separate claim. Here you go. God created the universe. And the idea, the drive behind biblical theology is going through and making sure your interpretation of passages are correct, making sure that you are not reading into something. There's some things that are very explicit. Once again, you can't read the Bible and think, oh, this Bible, like the Bible isn't claiming God exists. Obviously, God's talked about all the way through. Obviously, God exists according to the Bible, so that's a claim. But when we go through and we find that there's some unclear spots, we have to really look and see what is the Bible claiming here. What is the claim of truth right here? And this is where systematic comes in, that the Bible has a wide range of just truths that's just laid out on a table. Essentially, that's biblical theology. It's all just laid out on a table, all for you, right there for you. And sometimes they look kind of contradictory, and we're going to get into that in a second. But systematic theology comes in, and it's about what are the best ways to take these truths and unite them in one system. And so, for example, biblical theology can say uh, mankind has free will. I think that's taught in the Bible. I think that's pretty. I think you can show that pretty well in the Bible. On the flip side, you can say God is in control of the universe. God is sovereign over the universe. Well, these are just two claims in biblical theology. And in my mind, biblical theology is just saying, here's what the Bible teaches. Systematic theology comes along and says, okay, how do we connect these two claims and keep them both fully uh, truthful in the biblical context? What's the best way to connect these? And this is why systematic theology many times gets into areas that the Bible does not explicitly talk about, because the whole goal of systematic is taking biblical claims and connecting them in a way that is biblical, or at very least not denied in the Bible. Um, and so when we have two claims from biblical theology, such as free will and God's sovereignty, and you go to systematic theology, you have to be careful, one, not to just straight reject one of them. So, for example, open theists will say, okay, God just isn't sovereign. God just doesn't know what's going to happen in the future. He's not completely in control, because they want to keep man's freedom, and they don't know how else to connect those. On the other side, high Calvinists will just say, okay, man just doesn't have free will, that God is sovereign, and that's it. We're not going to bother connecting these two. We're just going to say this one isn't biblical. And you also have to avoid redefining one to just not mean anything anymore. I won't go too far into this, but I believe many even like mid tier, like middle level Calvinists do this with compatibilism, where they say that, oh yes, man has free will, but not like actual free will and how philosophers and most theologians mean it. It means like free will means the ability to choose within a certain set of circumstances, kind of. And we can talk about that later, but I believe that's redefining one of the propositions to such a degree that it no longer matches the Bible. And so this is what you're looking for with biblical and systematic theology. And finally, one of the major things is that if you run into an area where two claims seem to be clashing in the Bible, and we're going to look at a few of these next week. For example, it talks about in Psalms and it talks about in various places that God hates, his enemies. God hates the enemies of Israel. But we also know that God so loved the world. So how do you connect these two? Well, what you need to do, if you can't find a way that perfectly unites these claims together, you go back and you look into the passages and see if there's a way to understand it differently. For example, we see this with James and Paul writing in different places, and the words they use to mean salvation essentially differ according to each book. And so it's up to you to go back and find out, okay, what are they saying when they mean when they're trying to talk about salvation, the moment of salvation, what are the words they're using? And this helps line us out systematically. So I'm going to go leave it right here. Hope you enjoyed it, and I hope you come back next week to get the second part of this. I think this is a big idea, and this is very helpful to understand why so many systematic theologies go into areas that just doesn't seem to have anything to do with the Bible. And this is why, because they're trying to find a logical way to connect two different points that seem to be contradictory. So anyways, once again, I hope you liked it. I hope you come back for more. Once again, this has been Jared Morris with Settled Christianity, helping you continue in the faith.